Stay in your cell and endure severe abuse or escape and become a hunted criminal. In 1974, two trapped women made a desperate choice that changed the American justice system forever. The year is 1974. The place is the Westwood Correctional Facility for Women. It sits under the blazing hot sun of California. On the outside, it looks like a perfectly normal prison. There are high fences, thick barbed wire, locked steel gates, and armed guards. But on the inside, a completely different set of rules controls the inmates. The air is constantly thick with fear, and the intense summer heat makes the concrete walls feel like a suffocating oven. Survival here requires constant vigilance. The guards only control the doors. The real power belongs to the inmates themselves. In this dark hidden world, the weak are hunted by the strong. Enter Betty Miller. Betty is not a hardened lawbreaker. She is physically small, extremely quiet, and easily frightened. She possesses the mental capacity of a 12-year-old child. She does not belong in a harsh place like Westwood. She is a sheep thrown into a den of wolves. But Betty is not entirely alone. She has a friend named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah is older, tougher, and fiercely protective of Betty. Sarah watches over Betty like a mother. She knows that in a place like Westwood, vulnerability is an open invitation for a severe attack. After just a few weeks inside the facility, a nightmare begins. A ruthless gang of inmates targets Betty and Sarah. This gang controls the cell block through fear and intimidation. They approach the two women with a terrifying demand. The demand is simple, twisted, and cruel. They tell Betty and Sarah that they must submit to extreme physical and personal violation. The gang uses a terrifying phrase to give them an ultimatum. They must either give in to the gang's dark demands or fight a physical war they cannot possibly win. Betty and Sarah are terrified. They do exactly what they are supposed to do in this situation. They go to the prison guards, they report the threats, they beg for protection, they ask to be moved to a completely different cell block, they plead for someone, anyone, to intervene. But the system is broken, the guards do not care, they brush off the complaints. They tell the women to handle the problem themselves. The prison authorities do absolutely nothing to stop the gang. Day after day, the severe threats continue. The gang members laugh at them, knowing the guards will not interfere. The psychological torment is relentless and heavy. Betty cries herself to sleep every night, while Sarah stays awake in the dark, watching the door, waiting for the attack to happen. Then the boiling point arrives. It is a suffocatingly hot afternoon. 10 to 15 members of the gang corner Betty and Sarah. They surround them completely. There is no way out. The gang delivers their final message. They tell the women that the time for talking is over. They state clearly that they will return that night to collect what they demanded. The threat is immediate. The danger is incredibly real. The harm is no longer a possibility. It is a dark certainty. If Betty and Sarah stay in their beds that night, they will be severely harmed. Their lives are in severe, immediate danger. Panic sets in. Sarah looks at the terrified, tearful face of Betty. She knows Betty cannot survive a severe physical confrontation. Sarah makes a heavy decision. They cannot stay. They must leave the facility to save themselves. They are not trying to find freedom. They are not trying to rebel against the state. They are simply running for their absolute lives. When the opportunity presents itself, the two women make a desperate, frantic dash. They manage to get past the security measures. They climb over the high perimeter fence. They run into a nearby field. But their escape does not last long. In fact, it barely begins. They do not run to a big city. They do not steal a car. They simply hide in a hayfield just a few yards away from the tall prison walls. They are terrified, physically exhausted, and desperately hoping to avoid the gang. Very quickly, the prison authorities find them hiding in the dirt. The guards arrest them and bring them back inside. They are temporarily safe from the gang, but now they face a much larger, much colder enemy, the law itself. The state prosecutor charges Betty and Sarah with the serious crime of felony prison escape. In the courtroom, the defense attorney tries to explain the horrifying situation. The attorney argues that the women had absolutely no choice. They ran out of absolute necessity. They ran to avoid being severely harmed. But the trial judge shuts them down quickly. The judge instructs the jury with a cold, hard rule. The judge states that harsh or inhumane treatment inside a prison is never a valid excuse for escape. The judge tells the jury that a prisoner who escapes for any reason does so at their own peril. The law is blind to their immense suffering. According to the trial court, an escape is an escape. The jury has no choice. They convict Betty and Sarah. The conviction feels like a massive injustice. The women are punished heavily for simply refusing to be victims. The defense attorney files an appeal immediately. The case goes up to the California Court of Appeal. The appellate judges look closely at the facts. They see the records, they hear the testimonies of fear, they realize the terrifying paradox. The state locked these women up, completely failed to protect them, and then punished them for saving themselves. The appellate court realizes the law must change. The judges issue a groundbreaking historic ruling. They declare that absolute necessity can excuse a criminal act. They state that if a prisoner faces a specific threat of death, extreme personal violation, or substantial bodily injury in the immediate future, and there is no time to complain, and the prisoner escapes without using force against others, and then reports to authorities once safe, the escape is justified. The court recognizes that human survival is a fundamental right. The convictions of the two women are overturned. The law finally acknowledges their humanity. The story you just heard is based on the landmark 1974 case, People versus Lovercamp. The names and specific locations in the story were changed, but the terrifying reality remains true. Betty Miller was actually Mary Alice Lovercamp, a woman with the mental capacity of a 12-year-old. Sarah Jenkins was Marjorie Wynashe. They were inmates at the California Rehabilitation Center. Their desperate run into a hayfield forced the courts to create the necessity defense for prison escapes. They proved that sometimes, breaking the law is the only way to seek true justice. This was Courtroom T. Case closed.